Well, friends, today we'll talk about the array map method and why you should use it. Arrays are a very important part of JavaScript, and if you want to become a good developer, you must know them well. Let's go. The first thing we need to have is an array to work with. I created this one with the values 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I store them in the constant original. So if we want to invoke the map method, we will need to type the name of the array, in this case original, dot, and then map. And what map does? Map works in a way similar to a for loop. It will iterate over every single value on this array and it will transform it. And at the end, it will return, as a result, an array containing the same amount of values or items as the original array. And this is very important because a lot of people get confused and think that they can transform it and maybe reduce it to half or reduce it to a different value. For that, there's other functions that we'll learn in the future. But map, remember, for map, it will always return an array with the same amount of items. So in order to make it work, the map method is expecting us to provide a callback function. This callback function will receive as a parameter the value we are working with, and whatever is returned will be stored as the result of the transformation. So I can do something like this, for example, and I could increase the value of the original array by 1. So I can say x, that x will represent 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I can increase the value by 1. And as you see here, this is our result, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I could increase it even by more, and we would get whatever value it was here, plus 2 in this case. Remember, as I said before, I think I cannot stress enough the importance of being aware that it will return always an array with the same amount of items. Is that if, for example, I was used to not transform the value, but just ignore it completely, I could just return, for example, 1, and I would have an array of 4 items, all of them being 1, because every time I iterate over one of these values, I ignore the value at all, which is x in this case, and I always return 1. Okay, this is cool, but can we apply other logic? Yes, of course. We could use, for example, this same approach to, for example, multiply the value of the item by 2 or any other transformation, as you can see here. And a very cool thing that this pattern has that blew my mind when I started learning this is that they are chainable. So you can concatenate different functions that will be applied to the resulting array. What do I mean by this? So if I start with original again and I do map, and for example we could store this in a separate constant, for example increase, this plus 1 increase. I could apply it here, and we would get a similar array here, as you can see, the first one. But then, because this is returning an array, the whole thing, I could chain this map with another one. I could do this. Now, for example, if we copy this, I could have another function here called, for example, double, where we double the value, and I could pass it here. And this is very cool because in one go, in a very simple way, we are having kind of 2 loops, where in the first one we get the value and we sum 1, and in the second one we iterate its value. Let me see why it's not working. Yeah, I think it's this one, the one is failing. Okay, perfect. So you can see here that we got a 1, we increased the value to 2, and then we multiplied by 2 this value. This 2 was multiplied and now is 4. With the number 2, we increased the value by 1, 3, and then we multiplied by 2, then 6, and so on. This is very cool, but also this callback function is able to accept other parameters that are interesting, like for example an index. The index of the array map function is iterating over. For example, we could do something like this. We could provide the first parameter, which is the value, and the second would be the index. For example, we could return here just a string that is going to contain the value, in this case x, and then the position it displays at. For example, index. See, so we have 1 that is at the index 0, 2 that is at the index 1, 3 index 2, and so on. Or we can even have access to the array we are iterating. For example, I could do something like this: x index array. And let's say, for example, that we want to revert this array. We would like to have 4, 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. So something I could do, for example, would be get the last index of this array, for example, like last index, and do array length -1. And the -1 is important because if you think about it, we have the index 0, 1, 2, and 3, but array length is 4 because we have 4 items. So if we want to get the last index of this array, it should be the length plus 1, so 3. And then I could return, for example, the array plus the last, and then the index I want to return would be last index minus the current index. Therefore, by doing so, I would get this array 4, 3, 2, 1, which is just this array but reversed. Some people may ask, okay, and why should I use this array? Why cannot use, for example, original directly here? And that is a very valid question. As you can see here, it already works. But what we want to do is to be able to reuse this callback. We would like to use this as many times as we need it as a reverse function. So basically, we could do something like reverse, put it here, and now this function will work anywhere in this original array or any other. So it's important to use the one from inside. Whereas if I used, for example, the original array, I would be always pointing to this array, and I couldn't reuse this method, this callback, because it would be dependent on that array. Also, it's important to mention, and this is a pro tip, that you don't want to cause any side effects when you use map. What do I mean by this? We want to always get the same result when we execute this method. If I'm doing side actions that affect something else, like saving some data on the database, I cannot expect to reproduce the same effect always. If I want to do this, I would use other methods like for each that I will show you in a different video. For example, something I would like you to avoid would be something like this. Where I'm causing something that is totally unrelated to the array, just to print, in this case, hello, as many times as values there is in the array. But I don't want to do anything with the value of this array. So I'm kind of taking advantage of the function for doing something that this method is not intended for. Okay, and that's all. I hope you liked this video and you enjoyed it. If this is the case, please subscribe and hit the like button, and see you in the next one. Bye!